This episode of Super Pulp Science is brought to you by Fascination, an anthology from Tyche Books, edited by Rhonda Parrish. Fascination contains my short story, Hex Offender, available from tychebooks.com.
Attention, citizens. It's time for Super Pulp Science.
This is Super Pulp Science, where we talk about how genre gets made. I have called an intervention for myself this episode because I am chasing a deadline on a story collection that is coming due called The Witch Police, and I have brought on a special guest, Chadwick Ginther, to help me through this difficult moment. Also with me is my long-suffering co-host, Justin Curry, who is known the world over as chasing artwork. And he doesn't ever follow anyone's deadlines, so he'll do what he pleases.
I'm in this amazing little pocket that happens maybe twice a year where I feel like I'm caught up. I feel like I've...
Oh, I'm so jealous.
Because I'm always racing to deadlines.
I know.
With conventions are a big deadline for me. So San Diego is a huge deadline to have a bunch of things ready for. And Toronto is a huge deadline coming up for... It's Canada's biggest show, and I have everything sent off for it because I'm going on a family vacation right away. So normally I'm racing to get a last minute piece done, a last thing done, right before the show. But because of this family vacation, I'm ahead of schedule, and this never happens. I always not procrastinate, but you stretch it out.
Yeah.
With the time you're allotted.
Yeah.
And
it fills the cup.
It does.
Right?
Yeah.
It fills the
like
container. Yeah.
But at least sometimes 0 times a year, sometimes once or twice a year, I feel like I'm caught up and I'm in one of those bubbles right now. So future Justin, when you're listening to this, ha ha.
I will say that I feel more prepared for Toronto than I have in years because, the palette is carrying most of the heavy lifting there. And even if I forget stuff, I have more than can fit my space. So it's going to be fine. I get to hang out with George McHale, get all caught up on his movie news, so I'm excited for that show. But that's not what I need, gentlemen. This is what I need from you, specifically you, Chadwick. And for the dear listener, maybe this is your first introduction to Chadwick Ginther. He is a prolific short story writer, a novelist who writes in a number of different genres, but specifically roles myth and fantasy and urban fantasy and gritty street level characters. He does that so well. Chadwick, the other thing that you do is you put story collections together. You work on a lot of short fiction, and my Witch Police story, which I am now trying to get finished, Witch Police Cases, is functionally a collection of short stories, short novellas, which was going to be published one at a time. But by hook and by crook and by publisher request, we're putting all 4 of them together in one big volume.
Same characters or different characters, same world?
These are great questions that I wish I knew the answer to this close to the deadline. I am, to be fair, the stories in my heart of heart are probably 90% done. But that 10%, as we have said before, takes sometimes half the time.
Sounds like you have ideas.
This is my problem. So help me, Chadwick. What should I be thinking of as I race towards the inevitable print deadline?
I think you should find the one that is closest to completion.
Yes.
In your heart and on the page. Complete that. You have something done. You can, if you're building a collection, having something done allows you to spring from that. What would the story that logically follows this be?
Right.
How do I want the tone to change? And then you know which one you want to work on next.
Okay, so
It's an easy win as well.
Yeah,
Take
it's an easy win.
So, dear listener and dear publisher, if you're also listening, I've already completed that. The one that is closest to finish is locked, and I'm so confident in that one. Where I'm having trouble, where my confidence is wavering, is that what if the others aren't as good as that one?
What's going to end up happening is that
That'll be
first
what
one
people
is going to the one that you're unhappiest with by the end.
Right.
I always find those challenging ones that I leave until the end up being my favorite pages, favorite stories, favorite whatever. And the first one that I was so proud of pales in comparison by the time I'm done the others.
Right, because it's like what you could already do, and then now you've grown a little by the end of the draft. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I know in the collections that I have assembled, when I had all stories that were already complete that were going into that collection, it was the ones that I was writing for the collection that caused me the most trouble and that I had the most fun with. Because again, I was up against that hard deadline of if it's not done, it's not going in the book. And in my brain, I have shaped this collection that this has to be in the book.
I'm also wavering. So you asked about are all the characters connected? Or are they all part? They're all part of the same Witch Police precinct. They all kind of like
Same era too?
yeah, like homicide, life on the street. You know, that idea of like the camera is there in the precinct house, and everyone's working on their different cases, and they sort of overlap. But there's like the main episode is how I'm treating the stories. Also, there's like the main characters of this case. And then those characters are in the
It's like
background.
Reno 911, but with magic.
See, but with that's right. Good cops, bad magic is sort of like where I'm getting at.
The thing I find so interesting about that, and what I think would be a lot of fun to play with, would be the timing notes of throwaway bits of dialogue if they're in the same precinct that you could bring from one story to the next.
Like it wouldn't
and
make
be like,
sense in story 1, but by story 3, you now know what.
yeah, you
what
just
that was all
there's an
about.
overheard snippet of dialogue, and then you go into that
Wait.
case later.
There was an explosion down the hall. Like, ignore that. We have to whatever.
Say more. Talk about this more. And I'm going to make some notes as if this was my idea all along.
It's like Rashomoning your story, like from all the different perspectives. kind of thing.
Yeah. Dear listener, that was producer extraordinaire Dan Vadeboncoeur dropping the knowledge on a hot mic. You're right. I should Rashomon it.
Well, and if you want to say have an unreliable narrator or whatever, you give that you give the reader something to bite into. And it also, because you're collecting them, I don't want to say elevates them, but it does, it creates a unity.
No, you can suggest that the stories are lowly at this point and they should be elevated. Yes, that's okay. I'll allow it.
No, like I feel like I prefer, and this is just my preference, a linked collection of short stories. Whether that link is they all take place in the same city, the same precinct, have characters flow in and out of them. I read a Japanese author. I'm blanking on her name now. The collection was called Revenge, and it was just 11 short stories. And if you read each one closely, there would be like one throwaway line or one location or something that flowed from one story to the next. And it just kind of gave you, it just kind of gave you this sense of, I am reading a book, not a singular story. And it made it easier for me to not pick it up and put it down, where in anthology, like a thematic anthology, you see lots, I'm in lots of them, where it's just a bunch of different authors all writing to one theme.
Right.
Right. Where that's something that I can spend a year reading, as opposed to reading it as a book. I'll read this story, or I'll read my friend's story.
What you guys do with like the shared world, even though it is a bunch of different authors writing their own books, you guys come together and figure out those cameos in each other's stories together, which I think is a great thing that probably doesn't happen as often when it's just a call for submissions with want to be fantasy world, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You guys actually like, okay, I'm going to borrow your character for this little scene. And
I guess I buried the lead when I introduced you. We have also worked together very closely on a sort of sinister tales of sword and sorcery, the shared world. You had the Kyber novel, I Have Once Lands. You're working on Valkyra, the follow-up of that. So yes, I realize as you guys are talking that my cowardice is that I haven't made overt the connections. I've just passively made, like, in the background elements, the character names are recognized. The precinct house is obviously the same place, those kinds of things. But I have not put forward in the narrative an overt connection within the story collection. And maybe that is the pass I need. That 10% is like to think about what is fun to link between them that is itself its own story. My +1 would be, is there a way to make those 4 stories have a 5th story that is floating across them.
Hi. Murphy, transferring in from Metro South.
Nice precinct.
Yeah, pretty good.
You work for a living down here, Murphy. Get your armor and suit up.
The chief who has to talk to all these 4 other detective teams.
That's true.
Something like that.
I have,
Or even the front desk guy.
I have everyone pissed off at a mayoral visit. Like they're short on resources, and it's because the mayor.
The mayor's breathing down my neck.
Yeah, it's touring. The mayor's touring. There's a day mayor and a night mayor, and one of the mayors is touring.
Nightmare.
And so everyone's being pulled off for the detail, and so they don't have enough stuff. But maybe if I made that a little bit more overt.
What are your inspirations for this? Are you drawing from like some TV shows, some old movies,
So I like
books?
Some other podcasts.
Yeah, some other podcast. In the interest of full disclosure, the title "Witch Police" should be credited to a Winnipeg podcast, Witch Police Radio. And when I first heard about Witch Police Radio, I was a guest on it many years ago, and I asked the creator, "Why is this podcast called that?" And he said, "I don't know. We were watching The Exorcist." And someone calls, not The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby or something. And they call the police at one point. And he said, would it be the witch police? And which police would they call? There was like a joke in there. And like, would the police be witches or would the police only arrest witches? And what that has to do with his podcast, which is all about the Winnipeg music scene and the Manitoba music scene, it's zero. But that idea just lived rent free in my head of like, a precinct that just solves those crimes. And it was many years later that I found I had already written a number of stories in that world. When someone was like, have you ever heard of this reminds me of the Dresden Files. Have you ever heard that? And I was like, oh no, well, there's no point in writing these if someone has already done it. And then when I finally did read Dresden Files, it was so unalike.
Yeah.
The idea was so unalike that I suddenly was like, oh, well, then I should dust these off because they are their own thing. So some of the stories are old stories of mine, which I'm repolishing and adding my own improvements to. You know, I've grown a little bit, I hope, as a writer. And some of them are new. And my hope is that a reader won't be able to tell the difference when they finally get it. What's your experience with that bit?
That's exactly what I'm doing right now with Belcura. There's elements in there, stories that I drafted the first time around before I'd published anything. They predate the first published story in Kyber, but have similar characters.
We're
And
mirror
so-
images. That's one of the stories in this one. It's
And it-
like predates any of my publication, but it's right there when I was like, I'm gonna be a writer. So
And I know I can get it there. It's the flaws in it were structural more than prose. My prose is different now, but I know that I can get a story there because I've done it before. And back then when I hadn't done it yet, I couldn't do it until I had published, until I had gone through professional editorial, until I had somebody help me solve those problems. I didn't know how to solve them yet. And now I do, but just like I was just writing other things or I had other deadlines. And so it always felt like so much work to go back to that story I drafted in 2010 and fix it. But then
You build up the skill set.
yeah. And when we built Shared World together and those characters found a home there, it's like, well, I've got all this stuff
yeah.
that it's like, I want it. Like I liked it enough to write it in the first place. And a lot of times I still like, and you find stuff where like, that's an embarrassing turn of phrase. And I don't want my name associated with that in print now, but that's the nice thing about going back to that.
I think that's like a common thing with like all creatives. When you're starting out, your ambitions are much bigger than your skill set. And I think that's common, right? Like the first projects you want to do are a little bit out of your scope and your wheelhouse, but it's good to come back to those because you eventually, those eventually match up.
Yeah.
That ambition to do that really big project or that really epic thing now matches your skill set, and it's time to dust that off and do it or make it.
Well,
into
and one of the reasons I wrote Graveyard Mind from a first person female point of view was I'd never done that in novel length before. And so I'm like, even if this totally fails and nobody ever reads this book or I never sell it, living in this character for a year and writing 100,000 words in that voice, I will get better at it. So every story I write from a woman's point of view after this book will be better for having written this book.
A good segue when you were saying about like being, your reach exceeding your grasp. When My Bones Burn, a prose novel that you're working on right now, which comes in and out of your consciousness. You said it's back on your mind again.
Yeah,
right?
I have like an endless, my writing process right now, because most of my efforts and time are put into illustration, but I have like this endless note in my phone of whenever I have it, especially on planes when I'm traveling. Often I'm writing out like little scenes and like little things. And then what really helps me just with my workflow is I'm building this prose novel in InDesign. And so I'll have kind of scenes split up into like different parts of the book, and to the side of the page I can write like, on this page we're establishing that this character's a dick, right? Like that's the goal of like this interaction here. And then I don't know what happens next, but now we need to introduce this character, and then this scene happens. I don't know what the introduction looks like yet, but it helps me I'm not writing the thing start to finish. I'm jumping around, and eventually I want to make it a priority and like really simmer in the project. But right now I'm just taking shots at it every once in a while and accumulating way more than I need.
Which is maybe a good example as to why both of your advice right at the beginning was structural, right? Just find a structure, stick to your structure, fill the structure up. You write in fragments and then assemble them in drafts. I write in fragments, assemble them in drafts. You write in fragments. What's wrong with us? How come we can't have a cohesive thought over a week at a time?
Do you think it would be better to just sit and simmer in the project until it's completely done?
I think it depends on the project.
Right? Yeah.
I think that can work better for short stories, where theoretically it's a smaller narrative, it's a smaller cast, and you can actually, like, I wrote a short story longhand while we were at PrairieCon in Brandon in 2 days.
Just to show off.
Just in the moments between interactions. And
what are you doing, Chadwick? Oh, I'm just writing another story over here.
Well,
longhand.
But this is one where I had the advantage of I was writing the story from the Shared World book launch at McNally Robinson, where we collectively told a story together with the audience, and so I had all the beats. Right. So that was a story that had been outlined
for me. It's almost more like the grunt work part. You didn't have to be.
Yeah, I didn't have to think about the story at all. I just had to connect this to this, and how I did it didn't matter. I just knew I needed to get these points.
So when I was first starting out, before I did illustration, I was like, in earnest, I'm going to be a novelist. I'm going to write novels. I'm going to do this. So I have a number of drafts. I've gone through and looked at those early drafts. And speaking directly to your point, is it better to stick with it for a long time and just put it all? For me, clearly no. Because when I look, that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
And those books are a mess. They benefit from building a writing schedule. The one thing I did learn from that is that I must work every day in order to feel healthy and sharp.
Yeah.
But if I stick to one specific story, my flights of fancy will turn into dialogue beats that are like suggesting a larger narrative or hinting at some big thing. And there's just too many of them in those early drafts to ever pay off. It'd be like if every episode of a show you were watching had 7 like plot threads that never resolved, and then the next chapter added 7 more, and the next chapter added 7 more. That's what those early drafts of my books felt like.
Well, I think with what I have observed of Justin's workflow from being in the studio and knowing you guys over the years and listening to the podcast, your workflow is so fragmented between now I'm at a convention, and now I've got to draw this, and now I've got this deadline. Like it seems to you like you wouldn't have the time unless you made the time to sit in that draft. So I wrote a novel on the bus.
Yeah.
Longhand in my notebook, right? And I jumped around in that. And when I knew how much stuff I had from years of transcribing, I was like, okay, what are my 3 acts in this book? I've got sort of the act before he gets to his old hometown. I've got the act in the hometown while we're waiting for the big monster to show up, and I've got the big monster shows up and afterwards. So I just went through all those, you know, put them in their various acts, found the order, and then now I'm like, okay, I'm going to finish the first part of the book. Now I'm going to concentrate on the middle of the book. Now, I think I actually concentrated on the end of the book before I concentrated on the middle, because then I was like, I can cut this because it's,
Yeah.
you know, this is causing inertia. This is stealing momentum away from the end.
Well, yeah, like I think I find I like chipping away until it feels like I'm around that 60% of the material is there. And then that's when like the real, like the horse blinders go in and like the real concentrated work begins.
Lewis, come here when you finish fucking around with your suspect. Get on your feet. This guy's gonna be your new partner. Murphy, meet Lewis. Show him the neighborhood.
Glad to know you, Murphy.
Pretty neat.
With all my graphic novels as well, like chipping away a little bit here, a little bit there. And when I'm past that halfway mark of the bulk of the work, the foundation is there, that's when I lock in and that's what I work on until it's finished. So I find I need to hit that tipping point of enough.
So this project has a whole bunch of illustrated elements too. So just in the interest of explaining where my sudden doubt comes in, is that originally the publisher and I, this is Ape Press, we were going to put out Which Police Cases, Case 1 as a single book, Case 2 as another book, and so on until all 4 were done. And the trade market response, without going too far afield or telling too many tales out of school, when a publisher is talking to the distributors and the book reps, they can receive feedback of what kind of books are doing better than others and which are getting better shelf racking. And you could speak to all of this stuff about how that works, Chadwick. You've done that job before. But he said, since you're kind of nimble and you kind of have the ability to rearrange how we lay out this book, some information we've received, it would be probably better if it was a thicker, bigger volume for what it is we're trying to attempt. Do you think you could do that? I said, well, I could put all the cases together. I said, what is this sweet spot page?
Because originally it was going to be like 4 little books and now you guys want to do 1 big book.
Yeah, and I said, what's the sweet spot? And he said 200 pages. So from 50 to 200 is like a lot. Big difference on your deadline. But I had all 4 cases sort of 85% finished anyway. But there's also an element where the embellishments of the world I've done in illustration. I've done all these a little bit maybe unnecessarily, but I invented all these like forms and documents and like bureaucratic nonsense that would go on with if you were a cop keeping track of someone's hexes and the hex crimes. Then
A
you
magic police report.
Yeah,
Very
like
funny to see.
and how it'd have to be boring.
Yeah.
Right? It's like bureaucracy is being leveled
how,
against.
how
right?
dark was the magic?
That's right. So bureaucracy as a weapon against the miraculous in
Yeah.
this case, right? And so the all of that stuff, the world building of that is also trying to be laid out in and around the stories in such a way that doesn't distract from the enjoyment of the story. If you flip through it, it doesn't spoil it, because I can't like show who the killer is in a picture, or if you flip through it, you'll know, right? So it's like those kinds of things have been a real challenge to try and
Well, do you have the majority of those illustrations done?
Yeah, that's
and
all
you're
finished.
You're just sweating the placement.
Yes, it's just a design problem. So, but I have this huge design problem at the same time as a draft finishing problem. And so if I add an extra 200 words to one story and an extra 1,000 words to another, now the flow of the entire document changes. And now all those illustrations are on different facing pages. And it's like, it's normally, dear listener, sane people would have all the prose finished, and then that finished collection of text would get passed to the design. It would not change, and so there would be no worry, and you'd move the pictures around to make the flow work. But because I keep changing my mind on which image goes with what story, and what story has what word count, it is increasingly becoming a terrifying deadline looming monstrosity for me.
I mean,
So
not working as an artist and predominantly in prose, I just feel like you got to lock the stories before you can sweat the design. And
you're right. You're right.
because it's the changing the words that is creating your design backlog.
Is this like a medium for procrastination? Like, oh, I'm just going to work on the pretty pictures for a little bit and not worry about the words now.
Luckily, my schedule is so packed, there is no room for procrastination.
Okay.
Yeah, like so that actually
Sometimes is a really good thing.
Yeah, the one thing that is to my like in my character or in my psychological damage, the trauma that I have is that when it's time to just get it done and you only have so much time, the procrastination part of me vanishes and now I just have to do it and I'm excited for it to be done so that I can get back to procrastinating.
I know there's a game RPG writer I like, Kelsey Dion from Arcane Library. She wrote the Shadow Dark game, which is kind of evokes old school D&D. Yeah. She does her game design and her writing directly into InDesign. Because so much of the layout of her books is based on
The page
spreads.
turn. Yeah.
It's all spreads. Every character class is 2 pages, right? And so it has to fit.
Yeah.
And so that's how she writes it.
And this is my problem too, is that
And she's like, oh, I'm going long. And so she will edit, character ability descriptions so that they fit on that page where they're supposed to. So there's room for the facing art on the next page
well, I'm also struggling.
That's an interesting challenge
I love
to write that way.
writing it in design.
Oh, me too. This is what I love about it. And so this is also part of that is that I am writing, in some cases, two-page spreads. But then I'll have a change of heart and I'll add an extra sentence and now, no, that doesn't work. So then I have to nudge this image out of the way. And it's like, which one am I going to be beholden to, the image or the word? And because it's, of course, primarily a prose collection, I have to be more in service to the story than the image. But it's also supposed to be an illustrated collection. And so I'm trying to serve all those masters at the same time.
So now if you come at it with a hard enough eye, any prose story can lose 5 to 10% without losing story.
But I'm a genius.
But
my vision.
A magazine I love, New Edge Sword and Sorcery, is open to submissions right now as of August 1st, and I'm trying to get a story into them for the end of the month. And with all my I'm trying to get Valcour at least done in a way that I could show it to Jonathan before the end of the summer.
So wait.
And so I can't submit them a Valcour story that they would then publish for next year
ahead of the.
And so I'm like, I needed another story, but I had a story
Right.
that was a sword and sorcery, not set in the shared world, but it's 250 words too long. And for their guidelines. And this is a story that I thought was done 2 years ago. It's been out on submission, not as out as I would like it to be, because I just keep chasing drafting the next thing as opposed to resubmitting existing stories, which I should be doing. But I'm like, I bet if I look at it after 2 years, I can find 250 words. So that's what I did yesterday and this morning. I got this 6,250 word story down to 5,600.
See,
So now I just gotta do a final proofread and I can send it off. But
my
I
draft.
didn't lose story.
My drafting process is one where often the original version of the short story or novella is more or less unchanged in word count. I'll take out and put in at the same time until this is the plot. This is what happens. This is all the characters. This is what's happening. And then it will balloon by a few thousand words as I go in and embellish. And I'll say like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to know more about this place or this person or this thing? And then when I do that final rewrite, I cut. And I often am cutting old words and not new words.
Yeah.
And so there's like this, like, kind of like that scene in Akira where the body like undulates and gets big and then sort of shrinks down again. That's what my stories are.
I mean, to steal from Dr. Jonathan Ball,
Yeah.
You need to make the story more of what it is and
That's
less
right.
of what it isn't, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I do the same thing because I think we write from a similar fragmented style. We we both build it up
Yeah.
until, we know this is the plot of the story. And I still find I still am building it up after I know what the plot of the story is. And then I reach a point where I know structurally it's what I want it to be. I'm not moving things around. And I don't like trying to cut words unless I know something like, oh, this sentence is from, this is a vestigial thing from before I knew what the story was. I'll cut those, but I don't like honing the words down until everything is in its place. Because if I move it again, now suddenly, oh, I've already said this.
Yeah.
I don't need it here.
And I don't want to hear any more talk about strike. We're not plumbers. We're police officers. And police officers don't strike.
You're wasting your forward momentum by going back and like doing all those little trimmings and like that's not what you should be working on yet. Don't worry about that yet. You need to.
Those are my last two things. I think George R. R. Martin calls it his sweat pass. I look at it. I've got a list of garbage words they're just filler. Like just and ever and like, unnecessary that's. Like I look at all that stuff.
All your LYs go through.
And I don't just globally delete them. Like I look at every one, but I love jumping around the manuscript out of order. So I just go through the list and I'm just like looking at the manuscript piecemeal and I'll find, oh yeah, that sentence, like something will trigger and I'll be like, oh, I don't need that here.
Is it you or Jonathan who goes through it backwards?
Jonathan goes through it backwards.
So you can't just flow over the sentence and not take in.
So like usually before I get to that, I'll be like, okay, I'm sitting at 10,000 words. Ugh, I'd like to get it down a little bit. Well, let's say what's 10%? That's 1,000 words. How many manuscript pages do I have? How many words do I have to cut by page? And so I'll print it out longhand and I'll scratch stuff out and I'll try to hit whatever that per page. Sometimes I get more, sometimes I get less, but I try to, like, knowing and only looking at it a page at a time helps me really focus in on just the minutia of losing words I don't need.
Like that medium change as well. Like you start like longhand and then you bring it into the computer and then you print it out again and you mark it up there and then you bring it back. You're seeing it with fresh eyes when it's in a new format.
Absolutely. And that's why the list of words that I have to I have stuff that maybe aren't you wouldn't think of as a filler word, but things that I know are a problem for me, where it's like about. I will use about as like for something that is going around something. As opposed, like not necessarily it's correct usage. It's just it's a weird bit of vernacular that's snuck into
the
my
rope
writing.
was looped about his torso.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that it's snuck into my writing vernacular, and I know it's a problem, so I go looking for that kind of stuff. If I have a character that's not an asshole, maybe I'll go. I might go looking for things like, am I using blind or deaf as in a disparaging way that isn't actually talking about a blind or deaf character, right? Like I want to make sure that I'm not using those kind of like ableist slurs unconsciously.
So I have a question about
I want my words to be a choice for good or ill, whether you like them or don't. I want them to be my choice, not just an accident.
I have and maybe I already know the answer if I'm hesitant about it, but I have this one character who says some very unkind things to a bunch of other characters. That's almost their personality. They're just like, they're horrible. They're just a horrible person. And they say bad things all the time. But I find myself reluctant to be quoted as saying those things. Right? It's like,
even though you're writing a terrible person.
Yes. And that's conversation and a discourse that is happening online constantly.
Oh, constantly.
Constantly of, there's the, you shouldn't put that stuff back in the world side. And there's the, that just because a fictional character says something doesn't mean the writer believes its side.
It's a little too good at writing those sexist characters. What's going on?
So I don't think that's something that's ever going to be resolved, because I think, culturally we're going to pull, swing from one side of which is more favorable than the other.
Yeah, I think that's true. Okay, I have a real granular question.
I think if the only characters you ever write are sexist, ableist, phobic bastards, right? Then that's maybe a different conversation.
There's a pattern has formed. That's right. A pattern has formed. Yeah. So this character in particular, how they speak is different than how I speak, is different than how the other characters speak, and it sort of shows, I think, their trauma. It's like they are criticizing things they don't understand, and that's coming out in this character. But sometimes they say stuff, and I'm like, ugh, I hate this person. Maybe I'll leave it. I'm not sure. I have a granular question for you. Have you ever written a story in the present tense?
Yes, and it is a struggle.
Oh, Dan,
I haven't, but I've just finished reading a story written in the present tense. Actually, it shifts, but I'm sorry, this is awkward. Mickey 7.
Okay.
You read Mickey 7?
I saw the movie about it.
The movie's Mickey 17, and it's very different from the book. Very, very different. But every other chapter is a flashback. So the flashback is in the past tense, but the main thing is in the present tense.
Right.
And it took me a while to notice it. And I'm like, oh, that's very cool. And it was interesting.
A lot of it depends on. I mean, a lot of it is author preference, but also can depend on genre. You find, I think, I'm not a YA reader habitually, but a lot of young adult fiction is written in present tense. And I think one of the reasons is it creates that forward momentum. Things haven't happened, things are happening.
Right.
And Chuck Wendig writes in present tense a lot. I think that was there's a lot of discourse about his Star Wars novels, but that was one of the complaints.
Right.
Was that they were written, to my memory anyway, they were written in present tense, and a lot of the previous Star Wars Expanded Universe novels had not been written in present tense, and so this was Disney has taken over, and now the novel's reading weird, and and so there's so much going on. I read the first Grundig Star Wars novel. I thought it was pretty good, but.
So I'm struggling with this present tense inclusion. I have one story of the 3 that's written in the present tense. And when I read through the collection, you're talking about it like feeling of a piece. And when you're like pressed up against a deadline, dear listener, no, I'll say this. When I am pressed up against a deadline, dear listener, speaking only for myself, sometimes the differences that I originally made something interesting for me to try now become the lane where my doubt starts to back up its traffic. And so I have this one story that now it feels so different than the others because of the change in tense. I'm tempted to just cut it right out of the collection, but I also like that it changes the reading sensation in the total collection. And I'm sort of two minds of it.
I think structurally that would be very interesting because you're doing it as separate case files. I think it'd be a lot more distracting if you're writing multiple point of views in novel and one character is in present.
Yeah, it's a complete story in the present.
It's like I don't like when I read multiple POV books and one of the characters is first person, because it's like, well, this guy's supposed to be like a hard-boiled private detective, so I'm writing him first person. Oh, but I really need to do this world building for the reader to understand stuff that character isn't seeing. So they're all in third person, and that's always felt like a cheat to me. I don't like that, but I think because you're doing separate cases, that informs your point of view character, right? Like they are in the now. They are hard focused on whatever this case is. They're not reflecting on anything. They are just driving forward. I like that as a change of pace.
Now, I think one of the other things that's on my mind is that because none of these stories have been in print before, I also have this added thing of I want each one of them to be good on their own, and I want each one to be good in the collection. And I like designing a book to be its whole world inside the covers. And so like it's all that going on. But you've done short story collections where the majority of stories were published previously, and then you're adding in a new story or two. Why don't you just talk about that process and I'll gain some moss from it. I'll gather some moss around it.
Well, I mean, when you're in this case, this would probably count Kyber and my Thunder Road collection, When the Sky Comes Looking for You. None of those stories were ever written with the idea of this is going to be collected someday.
Right.
So the Thunder Road ones were just like, I have this thing that didn't fit in the books, this little side story, or like this unresolved plot thread. And like, I don't think it needs to be resolved in the core trilogy. But I want to know what happens. So I'm going to write the story and then we'll see if somebody wants to buy it. So there wasn't a thread. I kind of had to build the thread of the collection with the stories that hadn't been published, with the new stories, because each of the previously published ones were their, I mean, outside of taking place in an existing story world, they were their own world. Like I'm like, I have to make a Thunder Road story that works for a magazine reader or an anthology reader who's never read my books. Right. I have to make them intrigued enough, maybe that they want to, or if they don't, I leave them with a satisfactory story.
I better drive until you know your way around.
I usually drive when I'm breaking in a new partner.
It's a good thing to discuss, I think, generally. When you're making a book, do you guys think it's better to assume no one has ever read anything you have ever done and it just has to be its own thing? Or do you try to set it in context with your other work? Is that on your mind ever?
A little. I think a lot of my work is reactions to what has come before. So Thunder Road was my first thing that got published. It was a reaction to my first undrafted novel, which was a sword and sorcery, multi-POV, like 130,000 word, second world fantasy. And I'm like, I don't want to do that for my next book, because I'm like, it took me 2 years to draft and a year to edit this. And okay, now it's out on submission. If they don't like it, but they say they like my writing, right, I want to have something different. What's different? Okay, I'm reading a lot of urban fantasy right now. I'm loving urban fantasy. I was reading Tanya Huff and Jim Butcher and Carrie Bawn and people like that. And so I'm like, okay, well, I love this stuff. I'm going to try to write this stuff, not because urban fantasy is selling, but I'm going to try to write this because I love it. Right. And I think I have an idea. So I'm like, tight, single point of view character, set in our world, oh, but what are some things I liked from my first book? Oh, it had a lot of Norse mythology influence. That's never going to go away from me. That's something that I'm always going to like. That's something I've liked since I was a little kid. Right. So, all right, that is going to be my intake into magic for this, this fantasy world in our world. And then my next book was Graveyard Mind. That was a reaction to the Thunder Road trilogy. I'm like, well, I wrote like, a total dick bag, asshole character. I'm like,
a macho.
Yeah. And so like, I want to try writing. And I'd published some short stories with women protagonists. So I'm like, let's see if I can sustain that for a whole novel.
Right.
So that became my reaction. And then it was, well, if I'm not using Norse mythology, what else do I like? Well, I've always liked horror movies.
Right.
Let's do Necromancer. Let's do darker magic. Let's make it a darker fantasy. Maybe it doesn't have, like this is the hero that's going to save the city, save the world. She's not that kind of character. Okay. That's a little bit different for me. Right. So that everything I've done has been a bit of a reaction where in theory, something could lead a reader from one to the next, and they're of a piece because they're me.
Right.
They're all me. They're all different facets of me, but I think it has to be its own thing first.
I saw you teetering on a response there.
I find I often consider the cohesiveness of my booth and how the book is going to fit in.
Because that's how so many people see you for the first time.
That is where I sell 99% of my books.
Right.
Is at my table at conventions. And I think of the customers that are usually coming up and buying my work and how they're going to react to like upcoming graphic novels and whatnot. And I've tried this before where I worked on some kids' books, Quackers Learns to Fly and Ollie and the Missing Who's. I'm really proud of those books. But when I bring them to conventions and they're sitting on my booth,
they're not of a piece.
They are completely overlooked and they seem out of place.
Yeah.
And so that is a big thing in my mind. I'm working on this prose book. When it's done, how is it going to fit in at the table and how am I going to sell it with the rest of my portfolio? And so that's something that I keep in mind. And I don't know if that's...
Because your body of work is almost like a roving art display. It's like almost a gallery experience, increasingly more now because you have more and more canvases and things there. And so people come up and there's like the whole experience, the Chasing Artwork experience, how does it fit into that feeling?
Under the branding of Chasing Artwork. So I don't know if that quite answers your question, but that's a big part of
well, I think where that like a lot of your business is coming from. That's a consideration. Like at novel and book length I started writing sword and sorcery, but at novel and book length, most of my publishing catalog was urban fantasy or contemporary fantasy. And so that's kind of that was the lane that I kept going when I wanted to experiment. That's what my short stories were for, until I sort of built enough of them that then, you know, the shared world happened and Kyber happened.
But context, you know, dear listener, context is so important. So if you're considering, like in this very specific instance, the publisher saying 200 pages is better, part of the context of that is that if your book is on the shelf in a bookstore and it's only...
You can read the spine.
That's right. And you can't read the spine, it will be overlooked. But at 200 pages, now there's a readable spine once it gets shelved.
I will say, as somebody who's been a bookseller for like 25 years, I have nostalgia for like the Ace Flip books.
Yeah.
From like when I was starting reading. From a sales point of view, I hate them.
Yeah. So here's
and also like, but commonly they are multiple authors.
What's an Ace Flip book?
Like it was two different authors in a mass market novella.
And you
Wait,
flip.
do you know that was the original pitch for Witchbliss, right?
Yeah.
But
it would,
we're going to do it as a flip.
But it would be different singular author, right? Like you could have this case here, you know, this one case on top, G&B Kamichuk down the middle of the spine, second case, and either way you flipped it, it would work.
Yeah.
But when you have multiple authors doing a novella flip book now,
the Ace
where do you shelve it? Do you shelve it under this author or under this author, right?
Yeah.
Like unless they find two authors who are alphabetically back to back. And that's how they build their branding. Like it's from a sales point of view, and I think honestly from a customer point of view, it can be a frustrating experience. So if you know the author you're looking for, and that's not the bigger author for that bookstore, so that's not where they shelved them, you don't find them.
So I have my follow-up meeting with the publisher tomorrow about this. Matt and I are meeting about this, where I'm going to hear about the notes that led to the change. I suspect what you
Four
just
spines.
said,
each spine is a different case, and it unfolds like a flower.
Now, I love that idea. I don't think he'll go for it, but I do think your very wise observations as a bookseller led to the pivot of what we thought was a good idea because we were nostalgic for for that product. Being in the practical world of selling books, a few people probably said to him, "Don't do this. This is a bad idea."
If you're only selling it on your table at conventions, and you can be look, it's an Ace Flip book, and you're also you're self-selecting for an audience that will remember that specific product more regularly than your average bookstore clientele who's, you know, like every book in a bookstore is window dressing for the book that the customer chooses to buy. Everything is there.
Say that again.
It's true. Every book in the bookstore is just window dressing for the book your customer chooses to buy.
Happy birthday, babe. She's from me.
Well, hey, can I have you both?
Sure. We've had our shots.
I'd buy that for $1.
Let's say you're a history reader and you go in and there's only the three most popular history books currently being published this year on the shelf.
Right.
You're going to look at that and be like, this store doesn't know what they're talking about with history. So even if there was like 2 or 3 other books, you know, spine out on the shelf beside it, you would not be inclined to choose those books. If you're a science fiction reader and you're just like, I know all of these names.
Right.
There's nobody I don't recognize. This is not a store that caters to me, the science fiction reader, where that's having that robust
There's like
selection.
depth and breadth.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons, you know, like a lot of books are lost leaders, or the big names being published pay for everything else. Right. But if you don't have everything else, they're not going to go into the bookstore to find that book. So then you're only selling the books that are in drugstores and grocery stores and, you know, your Costco's, right? So you need that depth and that breadth on the shelf.
One of my motivations.
That's your struggle as a designer, is to make your book stand out, even if there's only one copy on it.
And also look, as Justin points out, I also do a lot of tabling, so I want them to stand out on their own in the bookstores, but I also want them to be of a piece on the table, and so like obviously part of the same design aesthetic, so close enough. Like I try to, this may be too simplistic a way to break it down, but I try to think of in thirds. Like the graphic design of this book will be a third like the graphic design of my last book so that it'll kind of match. And if that one was also a third like the graphic design of the book that was previous to it, the shape language of them all together will feel like they're from the same designer.
Because so much of our business is kind of like, if you buy two things, a third is half off or free, like
That's
the
right.
bundling, right? The bundling at the table with like the artwork and the books and everything together. So I think that's like ingrained in my mind, like since the early days of selling, like knowing that things are sell in batches. So you want them to go together as a batch.
I never sold more copies of Thunder Road than when the third book came out, and I could sell the entire trilogy.
Yeah.
It's done. And they're like, oh, it's done. I don't table as often as you guys, and I kind of have, but I only have kind of two sides to what I've got my Sword and Sorcery stuff and I've got my urban fantasy stuff. But when I do my like pulp adventurer Midnight Man character, I shelve him on my table with my Sword and Sorcery stuff.
Yeah.
Because he fights the same kind of monsters and he's of an era. Like the pulp adventurer kind of came out at the same time the Sword and Sorcery pulps and like the all the Lovecraftian, like the cosmic horror stuff. The flavors are similar enough where he feels like he fits there more than the urban fantasy side, even though you could make a case for him being urban fantasy. It's contemporary and there's magic and monsters and he fights them and whatever, but he seems like he fits more with my Sword and Sorcery stuff.
So, dear listener, the reason that I brought Chadwick on was because I so admire his ability to have a cohesive look at how stories are crafted, how they are collected, how they fit together. Justin and I, he is often my emotional support creature when we're out in a city where I go, oh my God, I have a deadline. And he goes, it's fine. You've got it. It's fine. It's fine. But he's in such a happy place right now where he has nothing to worry about that I felt like I should bring someone who's also crushing a deadline on a book.
Most of the time I'm also... This is a rare little window of time.
Yeah, usually we're like telling each other, you got this. And you're like, you got this. And we're like, it's going to be fine. We're just going to get all done. But dear listener, if you're working on a collection of words or pictures and trying to wonder if you're doing it right, hopefully this conversation will show that there is no right answer, that every project has its own solutions. It's telling you its own solutions. And so I'm going to break down from this specific conversation what I'm going to use on my draft that I'm actually now excited to get back into. So I have a meeting with the publisher tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Immediately, once we started this conversation, I realized that I would be getting up somewhere between the hours of 5 and 6 to carry out the following things. I am 100% going to figure out a fifth story that runs across all four. That is just told in the shortest word count possible. Like, could 1,000 words tell one other story of a character who appears in 2 out of the 3 stories already? And in both cases, or in all 4 stories, I have a few I could pick from. And I think the character that I want to elevate, because I feel like she has a novel, she's demanding a novel of her own. This will be my way to experiment with that. So your suggestion that I should have a through line is now gone from a suggestion to a plan. And I'm going to try and have it in place before I reveal anything fresh to the publisher so that I can explain there is a secret 5th story in this collection. And I think that's interesting. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to sweat the small stuff. The stuff that's already done, I'm just going to leave alone. And I'm going to go through and see what I can cut out now. I'm going to try and set the word counts and have them in stone before I meet so that everything else is just the design problem. I'm so close that what I really needed was to hear someone else tell me it was okay to be done. And whether you said that overtly or not, gentlemen, I am accepting this as my, that they're finished, Gregory. And I realized as I was speaking out loud about this, dear listener, one of the barriers for me is that one of the stories is from so early in my writing career that it's carrying the mood congruency and emotional baggage of not knowing if it'll ever be any good from that time decades ago. And I just have to let that go and just be like, yeah, that story, it is what it is. and maybe the publisher says, no, take it out. That may yet come. But from my perspective, I just have to be confident in the skills I have because I can't change them. They're the only ones I have. I can't suddenly invent new abilities. So, gentlemen, thank you for helping me.
The auteur style writer in me likes the idea of you submitting this designed document where it's like, oh, but yeah, if you cut some words out of that story, now that throws off the entire flow of the document.
You're right. Don't
That's a
create
nefarious trick.
Don't
Nefarious trick.
That is, and I've used that, I will say, to you, Chadwick. Justin knows this. I've used the flow of the document as my barrier against major revisions many times in my creative life, as you have too, Justin.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things where if you have a lot of skills and you're piling them all together, you have that, as a power. I think you have done all you can do for me. The rest is up to me, gentlemen. I so appreciate this. This has been Super Pulp Science, where we have indeed told you how some genres get made. This is GMB Kamichuk, encouraging you all to join the fight and make comics.